Okay. You ready? Let's do this. You're listening to Explore Magazine's Live the Adventure podcast. This is the podcast that delves deep into the outdoors, will inspire, inform, and get you stoked to explore. And I'm your host, David Webb. Welcome to episode 20 of Explore Magazine's Live the Adventure podcast. I'm your host, David Webb. Some 16 years ago, my mom gave me the book Prisoners of the North by Pierre Berton. I loved it. I became fascinated by Canada's North, and I knew I'd go there soon. In 2008, I crossed the Arctic Circle for the first time. Then again in 2010, back in the Arctic in 2014, 2016, and 2017. And I even squeezed another trip to the Yukon in there too. I'm a prisoner of the North, so to speak. And maybe, so is my guest, Joel Hibbard. Joel comes from a family of northern guides. He currently operates Canadian river expeditions and Nahanni River adventures, running raft trips down some of the most storied waterways of Yukon and Northwest Territories. Here's the thing, I'm a tourist in the North. Joel lives and works there. He joined me on this call to chat about the North, river travel, the future of guiding, and what it means to run an ethical, sustainable, and community-minded tourism business in the 21st century. It has me yearning for my next trip north. I'm double vaxxed and ready to go. So stay tuned for Joel Hibbard. Joel, thank you so much for joining me on episode 20 of Explore Magazine's Live the Adventure podcast. I wonder if you could just take a minute to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi, pleasure to be here. My name's Joel Hibbard. I own and operate a company called Nahanni River Adventures with my family in the Northwest Territories. And we guide and outfit canoe and raft expeditions through some of the world's most spectacular wilderness settings.
Amazing, amazing. So you guide trips through northern rivers. Why do you do that?
In some ways, I don't know any better or any different. My father started the business in the late 1980s, and I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family where spending time together outside was a priority. And after apprenticing as a guide as a teenager and putting myself through university that way, an opportunity came to return to the family business and see if my dad really was right, and if this was a lifestyle and a way of or leaving a mark on the world that was going to stick with me and really be of value in the long term.
And has it been?
I think so. Yeah, we've had an opportunity to go to places that few people are fortunate enough to visit, to meet incredible individuals from around the world who share a similar passion for wild places and unique cultures, and to come together as a family and get to know each other as adults has really proven to be one of the most rewarding parts of the whole family business.
So to get into specifics, so our listeners can paint a picture in their head, what are a few of the rivers you guide? What are a few of the areas your operation takes people into?
Well, you have to look at Canada's national park system as perhaps the crown jewels of wilderness areas. And we're fortunate to work in many of them. Places like Nahanni National Park, and Nazi Cho in the southwestern Northwest Territories, Hibbard National Park on the border between the Northwest Territories and the Yukon, where the porcupine caribou herd roams, and Colonial National Park in Yukon are all certainly world-class wilderness destinations that draw visitors from around the globe.
Yeah, beautiful places. I've been to a couple of those. I haven't rafted in them specifically, but yeah, they stick with me. They're places that don't leave you when you visit. I want to talk a little bit about the family business. So you grew up around this. This is your father's business that he started and your family business. You left and guided elsewhere and and then returned. Like, what does that mean to you to continue this family business?
Yeah, sometimes it means a little added pressure. Those are big shoes to fill when a generation kind of defines what a wilderness river experience is like. And I think we're in the midst of a generational transformation right now as the people who really founded the industry look towards retirement. I think for me, it was coming to understand some of the more immutable facts of life and the inherent importance that natural experiences have for our family and the impact that they inevitably have on everyone. There's just some fundamental reactions to wilderness that you can't escape. And I can't say in my 20 years of guiding, I've ever seen someone avoid the impact of a wild place after being out there for a week.
Yeah, I know. I can definitely appreciate that. And so when you look to this industry, thinking that your dad started it 30 or 40 years ago that he started?
1989, an opportunity came up to begin guiding on the Nahanni. So just over 30 years ago, someone broke an arm and he got the call to come up on short notice and fill in. And within 2 years had found a way to acquire a license to operate on the Nahanni, created a mailing list, and reached out to a crew of friends that he'd learned to paddle with. And all of a sudden, he was in business as a guide and outfitter, leading expeditions.
So now, with you taking on the next generation, how have things changed? How has this, the river itself perhaps hasn't changed, and the natural environment hopefully hasn't changed that much. But how does it change from your perspective, from a business perspective, and from what you see as how you want to run this in your tenure?
The travel industry is a global one now. We compete with destinations around the world. Who had heard of rafting in Iceland 30 years ago? I mean, even the idea of whitewater rafting was still just gaining traction in Canada, and expedition rafting was almost unheard of in a land where the canoe was the king of the waterway and really the chosen means for wilderness travel. At the same time as things have gone international, it's also become much easier to communicate. The advent of social media, email, these are all things that allow us to communicate much more efficiently and to see our business grow to a point where it sustains a number of members in our family. My sister is my business partner in this. My parents still actively work within the company. My brother guides from time to time, and my wife and I make our home in the north and see this as our life's work as well.
Before, I guess I would say before this last year, were you looking at an international clientele? Because if I think of your dad starting out and, talking to his paddling friends, is it a more international clientele, or are you seeing a lot of Canadians going up north still?
It's mostly Canadians. I feel like the wilderness experience is woven into our national identity in a way that really allows us to see these as almost rites of passage and real bucket list items. The Nahanni in particular is huge in Canada, and Pierre Trudeau the former prime minister played a pivotal role in seeing the park established in the 1970s. Justin Trudeau, his son, has played a big role in seeing the park grow to its current size and develop into Nazi Cho as well, an addition to the park that now makes it one of the largest protected areas in Canada. And when you have pivotal figures in our nation's history like that advocating for an area, you can't help but see the idea of it grow within popular culture. And we've certainly been fortunate to be able to share the river to other people who've come to understand what it represents.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that your whole family, or at least a big part of your family, has all felt the call to continue this on. Where were you born?
I was born in Ottawa, actually. My folks quickly left the east, and I grew up in the foothills of the Rockies in Alberta. And after some time on Vancouver Island, now live in Whitehorse.
So that's interesting. So I was on the website nahanni.com, which, by the way, is a fantastic URL. It shows how long you have been in the industry that you were able to snag that website address. But there was mention of the magnetic north and sort of the call to the north. And it seems like you perhaps have heard that call. And I wondered if you could speak to that about a call to the north that you might have heard and that perhaps your entire family has heard.
Is almost an appreciation of an aesthetic as much as anything. And I don't want to make it sound artsy. I mean, it is quite simple at the end of the day. Wild places are fewer and far between in this era. And so for us to find them, we've had to look north. I think as we look back at our nation's history, there's been a tendency to romance the north. And I mean, since perhaps even before its founding or before our nation's founding, guys like Samuel Hearne, the ill-fated Franklin expedition, and other colonial explorers also looked to the north as a place of adventure and discovery. But I don't know. I think maybe as a family, we've also found a way to see past that narrative of being the magnetic north as being a place where we're there to explore. And we've really come to build relationships with the local communities, with Indigenous guides, and come to understand just how resourceful and incredible these cultures are that could carve out a life year round in inhospitable climates.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That to think that a lot of the romantic notion that we have as Canada comes from sort of a colonial past. And I wonder you bringing that up, working with the Indigenous people of that, what does that mean to you as a business owner to be able to connect with a much deeper and richer past that goes back millennia rather than 100 years, 150 years? How does that enrich the experience for you?
I think some of the most formative memories I have of the North have all taken place when I was on the land with people who are from there, whether that's eating country food or having an opportunity to visit hide tanning camps where traditional cultural practices are taking place and being celebrated and being taught to the next generation, or simply just being on a river with an Indigenous guide who has taken the time to educate me and to show me that my worldview perhaps isn't complete, or that there's another way of understanding or knowing how we sit within the natural world. Those are treasured moments. And as I said off the top, I mean, I'm from the next generation of guiding and outfitters where we have to be different. I think we have to understand what has occurred, and we have to look towards what the future we want to live in looks like and try and define that for ourselves. We can certainly learn from those that came before us, but that doesn't necessarily mean we need to repeat what was done. And as a business, we certainly see ourselves as having a responsibility to the communities that we work within, and know that what we give back needs to be tangible and appreciated by them. It's easy to say things, but it's really difficult to do things for these communities, and to see them benefit from what we do, and the business we bring to these areas requires us to listen a lot. And I think to really accept with a certain amount of humility that we don't necessarily have the answers, but if we can find a way to communicate effectively, we can perhaps find them.
And so when you say you give back to these communities, is that in the form of employment, or what does that take the form of specifically?
A whole lot of different things, really. Certainly employment opportunities are there, and we've worked with Indigenous guides from across the north. The north side of Great Slave Lake is a community called Lutzelk'e. We've had a couple of guides come from there over the years. In the Decho, the Satu, north into the Delta. I mean, there's just been talented, wonderful individuals who've come to see working in tourism as a viable means of employment that have come into the company over the years. But I think something we're really proud of right now is just trying to envision what a different model of supporting Indigenous communities would look like. And we've chosen to invest in a tourism startup run by a woman named Bobby Rose Coey from Fort McPherson and WT. And she's creating a business where she offers Indigenous guiding and cultural interpretive services to companies like ours. She works with youth in on the land programs, and she also leads youth expeditions herself into her traditional territory, the Peel watershed.
Was there a different mindset, say 30, 40 years ago, I know you weren't specifically there guiding then, to now in terms of how the relationship with the Indigenous people is? And how did that evolve? Do you know how that evolved? Was it just spending more time listening and communicating? Or I'm just sort of picturing, early on these sort of people coming up, tourists coming up and going down the river and maybe not connecting as much to the cultures of the land. And how does that evolve over time?
Oh, I get myself in all sorts of trouble with this question. I think I need to answer it in two parts. One is I don't think tourism has always been good for these communities. The dollars have flowed into southern business coffers. For a long time, we were part of that. We were based in the south. That was something that was only changed a number of years ago when we moved to Whitehorse. And so I mean, I don't want to absolve myself from any responsibility in how things are playing out. I think as a whole, it's our guides and the younger generations that are really leading the charge. We attract very intelligent, passionate individuals to work within an organization that celebrates them and their skills. And at the end of the day, we really start to reflect who works with us. And as the guides have come to see themselves as really stewards of a place and as visitors, inevitably the story we tell changes as well. We also look at how the North is divvied up with colonial lines on maps as dividing one territory from another. We also have lost sight of the family bonds that exist between these regions. And I think the ongoing anthropological work that is taking place and the research that is happening within the national park systems, we're really starting to understand what the true connectivity of these places and watersheds are, and that how we view the world, or used to view the world, is perhaps not the best way to do so.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense in terms of the tourism that I've seen in the past while, that, you know, there has been this mindset of sort of almost like a colonial explorer conqueror type mindset, like I'm gonna, like, you know, beat this river, to a bit more of some people looking for a bit more of a rich connectivity, that you're not, you know, conquering a river, that you're like immersing in it, and there's more to it than just getting from point A to point B and then hitting the road and getting on with your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes down to a changing understanding in our culture as to what the role of nature is. It's not something that we can just take from. We have to see it as a cyclical relationship where what we take has to be returned, and everything needs to be in balance through all of our activities, whether that's in business or in our relationships with the people who call it home.
So circling back to when you said a lot of this was driven by your guides, who are your guides? How do you find them? Where do they come from?
Our guides are amazing, and they come from all over. Whether, as I mentioned, Bobby Rose Coe, she's from Fort McPherson, and comes from the Gwich'in Nation, and has a connection to these landscapes that most of us will never really, I think, be able to understand, let alone achieve. But then we also have physicians, we have teachers, we have dirtbag climbing guys.
It must be a high pressure thing, though, because if you hire a new guide who's going to go out there for maybe a week or 10 days or 3 weeks with guests, you know, how do you vet?
We run training expeditions. We try and make sure that all of our guides get a chance to interact with each other and company management, such as it is, at least once a year, in intense on the water experiences where we're sharing the skill set and the philosophy we put into each expedition, and then we work as a group and find a new river to explore, and really try and ensure that as we go down these new rivers, a big part of the idea is just in the joy of experiencing something different and allowing them to see that it's not just the hard skill set, but it's the true appreciation of these wilderness areas that is their responsibility to share. And so through that shared wilderness experience, we set the tone that they will then need to carry into their work as guides.
And are a lot of your guides long-term guides? They stay with the company for years?
We're so fortunate in that regard. Many of our guides have been with us for decades. Some of them were involved with the very first expeditions into the rivers that we operate on, and with 30, 40 years of experience are just a wealth of knowledge. And every time I am fortunate enough to be out on the river with one of these master guides, I really am reminded how much I still have to learn.
Yeah, that's an incredible amount of experience to have.
Some of them have literally spent years on one river. Like when you start to aggregate 2-week trips times 50, 60, 70, 80 trips, you start to accumulate an experience that allows you to notice what's going on, the weather patterns, the movement of birds and different wildlife, the fish that are in the river, what the leaves are doing. There's just so many little tells that help a guide do a better job when they're aware that they can be seeing these things in the natural world around them.
You mentioned that you go on new rivers with these guides. How do you compile a portfolio of rivers as an operator? Like how does that work exactly? That you find rivers and you get licenses, or exactly just I don't quite know how you put that portfolio of rivers together, how you determine that you're capable of guiding this river, and how that comes together. I wonder if you could shed some light on that process.
To gain a license in a national park is hard. There's a lot of paperwork that is required to document that you have the skill set, the operational prowess, and the logistical understanding of operating in an environment safely before you're issued a permit to take people into these watersheds. How you select which ones you want to do, it comes back to an appreciation of a wild place and what really speaks to you. And the places we choose to go frequently, the Nahanni, the Firth, the Alsek, the Tatchinshini, the copper mine. They're all storied landscapes that have settler history and First Nations history interwoven, and are complex and challenging landscapes to travel through and to interpret. And you're partly drawn to the challenge of it, but also it's important to also respond to market forces and what people are really interested in. And places like the Nahanni that have that cultural resonance in Canada will certainly help a business like ours be successful.
Do you have a favorite?
Oh, usually the one that I'm headed to next. It's pretty easy to get excited about going to wild places. I got my start on the Nahanni. It's the first wild river that I came to love. And I think I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for it. It's truly a landscape unlike any other. And for every river I travel to, I'm reminded of just how unique it truly is. Places like the Firth River in Inuvik National Park, where the porcupine caribou cross in herds of over 200,000. I mean, those mass migration experiences are things that you just don't see in this world anymore. I mean, we think about what it must have been like on the plains 150 years ago, when in the Bow River in Calgary would have seen a similar crossing of a bison herd, but that's not a reality that exists everywhere. So it's hard to choose a favorite, but for sheer landscape, the Nahanni is almost incomparable. The Firth is just alive in a way that's is indescribable, and the fact that you're above the tree line really creates an incredible opportunity to just really see. There's nothing in your way. And then rivers like the Alsek, I mean, you're dealing with a Himalayan sized landscape, peaks of over 5,000 meters and 100,000-year-old glaciers flowing into iceberg filled lakes, and all 5 species of salmon, and the densest population of grizzly bears on the planet, and just this incredible amalgamation of life-changing experiences that just kind of cascade through your sensory experience every day.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the Firth. I've been to Ivavik National Park on a hiking trip, and I actually, I don't know if it was your operation, but we were near the Firth, and some rafters came by and had to carry over this particularly challenging area, but we chatted. They'd been on the river for about 10 days, I think, at that point in time, but it would have been quite something to float that length rather than just do a base camp hiking trip like I did. It would be a very different perspective, and you'd definitely see a lot more of the land. It's really interesting.
I think that's the beauty of river trips, is it is a opportunity to experience a landscape in its entirety. You're moving at a speed that takes you through it, allows you to really experience it, but you can also access different corners that may not be accessible by any other means. You may not be able to get an airplane there, or a helicopter even. You may not have an ability to hike there, but if you take a boat there and you take enough food and supplies to live comfortably in that location, it becomes an experience that just can't be replicated in any other way.
It seems very logistically challenging to take a group of guests into the remotest wilderness really on Earth, some of them, and bring them all, make sure they are not only safe, but they have a good time and and they're comfortable. What are some of the key challenges to just ensuring group dynamics, group safety, group enjoyment, and how do you manage that with you've tested your guides, but you haven't tested your guests specifically. So how do you manage that?
Wilderness experiences self-select in a lot of ways. The people who are out there tend to have an appreciation for what is there. They're rarely coming kicking and screaming, and these are the experiences they've been dreaming about often since they were children. And when we get a chance to share something that people have dreamed of for their whole lives, it obviously puts everybody in a great mood.
So you find the guests are just, they come there, their excitement is a big part of it, that they're just so happy to be there that everyone is just kind of on the same level to begin with? I
think so, yeah. I mean, our guests are really the salt of the earth in a lot of ways. They're people who have built careers in public service and education, and really reflect our society, the best of our society. And when they show up, they are really excited to experience the best of what Canada has to offer as far as wilderness goes. And at the same time, that only increases the pressure on us. I mean, we have to deliver that. The wilderness does such an incredible job of drawing people there, and it certainly never disappoints. So we've got to be on the top of our game year in and year out to deliver consistent, high quality experiences where nothing gets in the way of someone's opportunity to appreciate what's around them.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that when you think that these are bucket list trips for some people, they're blocking out maybe a year's vacation and they're spending, not a small sum of money to be up there. There is that pressure, and you're in an environment that you don't control. It's not like it's an amusement park where you can just spoon feed them everything, that you don't control this environment in any way. So I can see that pressure to make sure that, obviously weather is a big part of it, but you're hoping that it doesn't pour rain for 2 weeks straight or something like that, because nobody really wants that. But it must be a lot of pressure.
I think that's when we know when our guides are ready to start leading trips, is when they understand that they're really painting a picture with all the tools that are at their disposal, and the natural world is their canvas. They're going to get what they get, but our senior guides, our lead guides are people who understand that even in the rain, there's something beautiful to be appreciated. And whether that's the waterfalls that sprout off canyon walls, or an opportunity to experience different plant life that comes up when a rainy summer is our reality, or just to come to understand what the birds are doing in inclement weather. There's lots of different ways to see the beauty in every moment. And of course, we're all hoping for sunburns and swimming in the river, but if that's not the case, it's our responsibility to ensure that the experience is no less memorable.
It's interesting to think about that you mentioned in Invervik National Park, for example, the porcupine herd. It might be a reason that someone went up there, and there's a very good chance that you won't see it.
Yeah.
So it must be also about setting expectations as well, and just managing that and being like, listen, I can promise you a trip down a scenic river, but I can't promise you sun every day. I can't promise you muskox grazing by the riverbank. Mm-hmm. I can appreciate the challenge. So it's good to know that everyone comes there with a positive mindset, because that goes a long ways.
Well, I mean, our office staff and trip planners are just as an important part of the equation as our guide team. They're there to help people understand what the realities on the ground are, to ensure they have support as they make the decision about which expedition is best for them, and to help them understand what the options really are. We've got an extremely high return rate. Over 40% of our guests each season are repeat visitors, and to be able to see them see the experiences we offer as something worth doing again, or experiencing somewhere else with us, is a real, I think, compliment to the entire team's ability to work together to see people value what they get out of these experiences. Because they certainly aren't inexpensive, but there is always a value achieved for that dollar that I don't think you'd find anywhere else.
That's interesting. Just circling back to you're talking about the front desk, customer service, the travel bookers. So do you have people calling up and they know they want to do something like this, and they need to be, and they want to be sort of led into the right trip? Or is it mostly people being like, no, I want the Nahanni, I want the Firth, I want the Alsek, or how does that work?
It's a little of both. I mean, in any situation where selling is part of it, some people know what they want, and other people need a little help, and they've heard about us and that their friends had a great time the year before, or their family, their father had dreamed of it, or mother had a hope of visiting one day, and now they're seeing an opportunity to see a whole intergenerational family experience be a reality. And you get these family groups that come together who want to book out a whole trip, and they want to ensure that grandpa and the 8-year-old both are going to have a great time, and we can help that be a reality with sound advice and an opportunity to have lots of in-depth conversations, and really just be here to listen to what they're hoping to experience.
How much time do you spend on a river in a year?
I always aim for 6 weeks of guiding a summer. That's my goal. And then if I'm lucky and my wife's in a good mood, I usually manage another 6 weeks of personal or exploratory work outside of that, aiming for 3 months of the year in a tent.
Wow, that's great. That's interesting to hear, because sometimes I think if you take on that operator role, and maybe it means less time doing what you really, really loved about it in the first place. So that's really interesting to hear that you can get away for as much as 3 months a year.
I wouldn't do it without a great team behind us.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Because it's not like you're in communication with the front desk on some of those trips.
I mean, that going back to when we were talking about what has changed. Satellite technology has changed the game. I travel with with a sat phone and with an inReach, and between the two can solve most challenges that might pop up. But I know this is a travel show. We could talk about managerial strategies and empowering your people. I mean, there's rare.
At this point, our transmission cut out and I wasn't able to connect with Joel for about 24 hours. It seemed a severed fiber optic cable in northern BC cut out internet service to much of Yukon. We connected a couple days later to finish the interview, which we'll get on with in a minute, but this was certainly a first-hand view of the trials and tribulations of running a tourism business in Canada's north. So I noticed looking at your operations About Us section on your website, there's a lot of talk about conservation and stewardship of the rivers and the natural areas. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about this, what this means to you, and how it's a part of your business.
Well, I mean, for us, it really makes business sense to protect these places. Like any industry, there are certain resources that are required to make money. And for us, that is an intact, ecologically functioning environment that people have a desire to see. And so at the end of the day, while it does make dollars and cents, I think it is also a responsibility of ours as licensed outfitters to just ensure that the resource remains intact and in a condition that we can hand it to the next generation with a measure of pride, and also share the responsibilities that will then be theirs as well. I was given the opportunity to learn to guide under master guides who were very sure of the value of these wild places, my father included, and I hope to one day mentor others to see things in the same light.
Yeah. So how do you do it? What is your role? What are your company's role in some of these projects?
We approach it in a couple of different ways. I mean, there are certainly conservation organizations out there that lead the charge and really help do on the ground science and ensure that the issues that these regions might face from encroachment by heavy industry are made known and shared in a digestible format. I mean, reading particulate numbers of sediments in streams and all of the science is certainly not in my purview, but when I can interact with scientists from the Yukon to Yellowstone Initiative or the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, I know I'm receiving information that is really impartial to the interests of industry. I can certainly acknowledge that I have a horse in the race as well, and my impartiality is certainly not there. I want an intact environment, and my job and my guides' jobs depend on that being the case. So I certainly take it all with a grain of salt and know that money impacts. But I would also say that, I mean, every industry advances its own interests, and I have no problem doing the second part of how we engage with the conservation initiatives, and that's through fundraising. We donate part of our gross profits through 1% for the planet to initiatives. We fundraise on specific causes, and we invest directly into people we believe who are doing good work. I think it's, again, part of our responsibility as an outfitter.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, it is true, most outdoors people, they want to conserve and protect the areas that they enjoy recreation within. I mean, it is this funny self-serving thing, but I don't think that takes anything away from it. And perhaps yours is a little different that you have a business operating out there, but I don't think that takes away from it in any way, that the overall ethos of protection remains, regardless if you're running guided trips down there or if you're just interested in the conservation.
Mm-hmm.
The end result is the same.
I think if we look at the actual time scale of human existence in these areas, even though a tourism business may not generate the immediate returns of a large scale gold mine, they do, given a generation or two, provide equal amounts of employment opportunities, as well as the immeasurable benefits of intact ecosystems, the clean water, the ability for carbon sequestration to occur. All these different functions of the ecosystem that are often taken for granted are allowed to continue unabated. And I don't think we're really taking those into full consideration when we determine what projects go ahead and what don't.
For sure. Yeah, I know. In recent years, I've read so much about the economic impact of tourism operators over the long term, and it is quite incredible, actually. It's definitely a shift that for a long time, I think people looked at natural areas as places to extract resources from and little more, even though there were tourism operators there. But now we're seeing these like benefits, peripheral benefits and long-term benefits that are at times more than these resource extractions. In fact, many times more.
And there's the idea of over-tourism as well, though. And I think as an outfitter, that is another area where we need to be careful and be willing to listen to the science and moderate our impacts as that is determined. Whether that's ensuring human waste is removed from watersheds by carrying it out in portable toilet systems like we do in many of our rivers, or if it's just simply considering how best to access these wild places without disturbing the ecosystems that may lay between the edge of the road systems and the headwaters that we started. These are all areas that we need to be thinking through thoroughly and understanding that we may not be able to continue as we have in the past.
Yeah, so you're always making advancements there and sort of your sustainability plans, you'd say. Yeah.
Certainly, yeah. You have to be critical of your own operations. I feel like if you start to rest on how you do things as the best way, you lose an opportunity to improve. And so we're happy to engage on it and take feedback, and certainly concede that we're not perfect, but we will commit to always improving.
To wrap things up and look forward, what does the future of river guiding look like in the North to you? What do you imagine how it changes, how it evolves over, say, 10 years or more?
Oh, if I can dream to work within an industry that shares the intricate nature of these wild spaces in all seasons, and really draws attention to the fact that these places are often underprotected and underappreciated for us as a country.
And do you think you're on the pathway to that as an industry, as someone who's part of a tourism industry up there, or?
I think we're taking the first steps. I think we know what we need to do, and now we just have to get started and get it done. And in the midst of this pandemic, that is where the silver lining really lies, is that we have an opportunity to reflect on where the industry came from, where it's at, and where we think it should be in the future. And make the necessary investments and take those first few faltering steps towards a more sustainable and more equitable tourism business.
Yeah, well, all the best of luck. It seems like a big venture to take on, but I like the path you're headed on.
It's been a pleasure to get to tell you a little bit about it, David. I appreciate your curiosity.
Yeah, no problem. So if any of my listeners wanted to find out more about your operation, where would they do that?
Well, we exist on the internet like everyone else. www.nahanni.com is where you can find everything about our river expeditions. And certainly don't hesitate to follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Nahanni Wild.
Great. Awesome. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure. Take care.
I'm feeling the magnetic draw, the call to the north. The next trip will be different. I'll take my kids and my wife, my dog too. You'll love it. I hope my kids fall in love with the North as I have. Maybe when they're older, I'll be on the phone with Joel again, booking a family trip down the Nahanni River. For now, this conversation will have to do. I hope it whet your appetite for some northern rivers, and I hope it sheds some light on the northern experience. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm David Webb, and hey, live the adventure.